Welcome. This week we're going to do Parshas Toldos. So the Parsha starts that Yitzchak and Rivka don't have any children. She goes to Shem. Then she has twins, Yaakov and Esav. And then they grow up on different paths. And at the end, Rivka is partial to Yaakov, Yitzchak is partial to Esav, and at the end, Esav sells the Bechira to Yaakov. That's the first part of the Parsha. Then we have Ahirov Ba'aretz. There was a famine, and Yitzchak, they went down to Plishtim, to Gerar, to Avimelech Melech Plishtim. And there's a story where he told people that Rivka is his wife, and Avimelech had designs on her, and then he had a chacham. Then Yitzchak stayed there for a long time. They had be'eros, he dug a be'er, and they made a compact, and that's the whole story. After that, we come to the brachas. So during this whole story of Yitzchak and Gerar, where are the boys? Where are the boys? Where are the Yaakov and Esav? So I looked around in the Farshim, nobody addresses it, only the Ramban. The Ramban says that maybe the people in Gerar thought that these boys were Yitzchak's children from another wife. And this wife this is not his wife, this is his sister. But Lamaisa, okay, this is Ramban says. But the whole first part of the Parsha has to do with the interaction between Yaakov and Esav, and he grabs him by the heel, and then he sells him the Bechira, and then at the end you have and in the middle they're totally absent from the middle of the Parsha. And I would think maybe they did something that was of interest. I mean, these two, constantly in conflict, nothing here. So I think I just want to suggest that maybe, ein mukdem ucher b'Torah. The Torah does not always follow chronological order. And there's a reason for it. There's not just chaos, haphazard. There's a reason for not following chronological order. I think that the story of Gerar happened before, when they didn't have any children yet. It happened before. Now, why would the Torah do this? Because at the end of Parshas Chayesara, we have all about Avram married Keturah, and he had these children, and these were the children of Midian, and these were the children of Yokshan, and then the Eila Toldos, Yishmael ben Avram, tells the Toldos of it, tells all his Einiklach through Keturah, through Midian, through Yishmael, all his Einiklach. So it would be proper that we should also tell about his Einiklach from Yitzchak, who are his most important Einiklach. So the Torah continues this. You're not going to stop this and then go on tell you something else and come back to Toldos of Yitzchak later. In this discussion of who are Avram's progeny, then the Torah says, okay, fine, all these people, fine, but Ela told us of Yitzchak ben Avram. El told us Yishmael ben Avram. El told us Yitzchak ben Avram. This is the main point. Tells Yitzchak ben Avram. So Torah immediately tells you about told us Yitzchak ben Avram. So Torah tells you that Yaakov and Esav were born. Now, the Gemara says in the Dora, Manas Sanhedrin, that Ki b'Yitzchak yikar l'chazora, that your lineage will go through Yitzchak, v'loi kol Yitzchak. Not all of Yitzchak. Yitzchak had Yaakov and Esav. The lineage of Avram does not go through Esav. It only goes through Yaakov. And Rashi says that Esav is not considered Zera Yitzchak. he's not considered his children. So we don't complete the story of the Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram until Esav sells the Bechayra, because I think it would be Mistavra that at the point where Esav sold the Bechayra, at that point he forfeited being part of the as long as he was the Bechayra, I suppose he was still considered Zera Yitzchak. But once he sold the Bechayra, then he was no longer Zera Yitzchak. So when we finish this whole story where they're born, and Esav sells the Bechayra to Yaakov, at that point he is eliminated from the Zera Yitzchak. So the Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram is completed at the point where Esav sells his Bechayra to Yaakov. That's completed. Now the Torah backtracks. Now we have a flashback. What happened before this? There was a whole time between Chayisora, when Yitzchak married Rivka, and when Yaakov and Esav were born, there was a long period of time. So what happened during that time? So during that time, they went down to Gerar. And had all these stories. But at this point, the boys weren't there. They weren't born yet. This is what I would think, maybe. Now, Rashi says, Yitzchak was davening facing his wife, or across from his wife. His wife was standing in one corner, he was standing in the other. They're both davening. Vayetar lo, and it says Vayetar, that he was davening. The Lashon Vayetar is not a regular Lashon of davening. Hirba v'hifzer b'tfilah. He was really davening intensely. He was davening hard. And I guess both of them were. So then it says Vayetar loy. So Rashi says loy v'loy la. The tefillah who was answered was Yitzchak was answered, and not Rivka. Why? She'ein doima tefillah tzaddik ben tzaddik letefillah tzaddik ben rasha. There's a difference between tefillah tzaddik ben tzaddik or tzaddik ben rasha. Now, what is the difference between the two? If the word is that a tzaddik ben tzaddik, so he has the schus avos, so Rashi should say loy v'loy la mipnei schusay shel Avram, because of the schus of Avram. So that's why Yitzchak was answered. Rashi is saying a rule that ein adayim tefillah tzaddik ben tzaddik and tzaddik ben rasha, that there's a difference in the tefillah itself between the tefillah of a tzaddik ben tzaddik and tzaddik ben rasha. What's the difference? If you say that tzaddik ben tzaddik is a bigger tzaddik than a tzaddik ben rasha, then Rashi should say ein adayim tefillah tzaddik gadol letefillah tzaddik kotten. So apparently there's no difference in the level of tzidkas between the tzaddik ben tzaddik and the tzaddik ben rasha. They're both more or less equal tzaddikim, but tefillah tzaddik ben tzaddik is more effective than tefillah tzaddik ben rasha. What does that mean? What does that mean? So, the Torah uses anthropomorphisms. Long word. What does anthropomorphism mean? That you talk about the Rabbeinu Shalom as if he had the form of a human being. You talk about his hand, you talk about his foot, you talk about that he gets up and he moves and he this, all these kind of things. He smells the reich nichayach. All these things are called anthropomorphisms. We're talking about the Rabbeinu Shalom and using the language which would be more appropriate, which would only be appropriate to use for a human being. We use it for the Rabbeinu Shalom. Now we know that the Rabbeinu Shalom is the infinite, Einoid Milvadoi. He doesn't move. Where does he move from? From one to another. He doesn't move. He doesn't smell. He doesn't have senses. He's completely something else. We don't understand what Rabbi Shalom is. We spoke about this in Parshas, that it's beyond our hasaga. We cannot understand what he is. So we want that people should be able to relate to him. This is what the Rambam says in the Moira Chelik Aleph Perek Chavav. And this is what the Chayvas Levava says in the last parak of the Shari Yichud, that the Torah wanted that people should be able to relate to the Rabbeinu Shalom. And how do you relate to the Ein Oid Milvadoi? How do you relate to him? It's very difficult to relate to the Rabbeinu Shalom. So the Torah tolerates a certain amount of anthropomorphisms for people who are not very sophisticated, But hopefully, as they become more and more sophisticated, then they will move away from the anthropomorphism, and then they will daven. They would not think of the Ribono Shel Olam as moving, as smelling, as anything. And the Chovos HaLevavos says that even though we tolerate anthropomorphisms, but to create an image in your mind of what the Ribono Shel Olam is, that is absolutely cannot be done. The only thing we accept that he moves. This after he finished talking to him, he left. So what does it mean he left? It doesn't mean where did he go? It doesn't. He's Einod Milvado. I mean, he's infinite. It doesn't mean that, but that's acceptable for people to think that, and for a while until they reach a higher level. So the more sophisticated you are, even to think of the Ribono Shel Olam as a being is problematic. Because what do you mean he's a being? He's not a being, he is being. He is existence. Nothing else exists except for him. A being means like it's a certain being with contours that has dimensions. He is not a being. The Ribono Shel Olam is not a being. The Ribono Shel Olam is everything. So how do you daven? How do you daven to the infinite, to the Einod Milvado? How do you do such a thing? It's very difficult. And that's why the Torah tried to make it easier for people that they should be able to daven to Ribono Shel Olam to allow a certain number of anthropomorphisms. But it's not the truth. And it's how do you daven to Ribono Shel Olam? So there's something that a mashal that I made that I would like to tell you this mashal. You know, a person has to stand in front of a judge, and he's pleading for mercy. He wants the judge to give him mercy. So he talks to the judge, he looks at the judge, and he begs him, and he pleads with him, and by his expressions of his emotions, he tries to influence the mind of the judge. He tries to sort of impose his will on the mind of the judge, that the judge should come around to his way of thinking and understand that really he should be merciful with him. He shouldn't, and he should go easy on him. That's natural. It's natural. A person goes into court, you look at the judge, and you try to talk to him. But I have something called a pleading room. That means there's a room, and that's where you're going to plead for mercy. And you walk into the room, and on all four sides there's a panel, and the judge or judges is or are behind the panel. You don't know if there is one judge or many judges. You don't know if the judge or judges are white or black or Hispanic or Jewish or non-Jewish. You don't know if the men are women. You don't know if they're tall or short. You know nothing about the judges. You don't know if they're in front of you. You don't know if they're behind you. You don't know if they're to the right or to the left. You're in the middle of the pleading room, and you know that there are judges there, and you have no idea who or what or where they are. Nothing. So, and you have to plead. So you go in there and you plead, and what happens is that your plea is not directed to anyone because you don't know where to direct it. It's coming from you. There's no to, there's only a from. That's what, in a pleading room, you have no choice but to only plead from. You do not have the option of pleading to, because where's the to? And where? And what? So you can't plead to. The same things with the Ribono Shel Olam. Of course, we daven to the Ribono Shel Olam. The Ribono Shel Olam hears us. We know that. But the plea itself, is it a plea to, or is it a plea from? You cannot really have a plea to the Ribono Shel Olam because you have no idea what he is. You have no idea where, what, when. It's beyond your asagas. How could you? You know that your tefillah is heard, but you cannot talk to the Ribono Shel Olam. He's not a being. How do you talk to existence? You can't do that. It's beyond our asagas. But you can do from. You could talk about yourself. This is what I'm pleading. I'm not directing it anywhere. I'm not trying to impose my will on anyone. I'm not trying to influence anyone. I'm just opening up my heart and pleading, and that's my tefillah. That is the way a tefillah should be. A tefillah should be coming from you. You know the Rebbeinu Shalom hears it, but you're not directing it to a specific being and trying to influence that being with your tefillah, because that cannot be done. That is what a tefillah should be. That is a very difficult thing. And that is something that a tzaddik ben tzaddik is more capable, especially when it's hiftzir, when he's really davening hard. That is something that a tzaddik ben tzaddik can do. He's more capable of doing that, because he's seen by his father that his father doesn't have any images. He's a tzaddik, he has no anthropomorphisms. So it's easier for a tzaddik ben tzaddik to relate to that you only daven from, that you can't daven to. A tzaddik ben Rasha, that the Rasha was like, Rivka's father was an Oved of Avodah Zarah. There was plenty of two there. He was going to the Psu, was going to the Avodah Zarah and talking to the Avodah Zarah or talking to the star, and there was a very strong two there. So even though now that she is a tzaddikis and she's moved away from that, and of course she understands that you're in the pleading room and everything, but the level of comfort with that, of feeling that, of actually doing that, is much stronger by a tzaddik ben tzaddik, by a tzaddik ben Rasha. So the tefillah of a tzaddik ben tzaddik is a better tefillah, because it's pure. There's no part in it, not even a shemetz, not even a trace of anything which resembles anthropomorphism. That's why I think Rashi is saying that tefillah tzaddik ben tzaddik is better than tefillah tzaddik ben Rasha. Now, at the end, just a couple of small things before I go on. At the end, we have that Yitzchak went to Beersheba, and then he dug a bear. He dug a bear, and they said his servants came and told him that they found water. Vayikra says Shiva. He called it Shiva. And Shiva is a shvua, lashon shvua. Rashi says al shem shvua, al shem bris, because he made a covenant with Avimelech. Al kein shema ir be'er sheva ad hayom hazeh. So it's Beersheba. So this Beersheba, he came before, Avram was in Beersheba, and Yitzchak here went to Beersheba. So what is this Beersheba? It's like, what is this? So there's a cloud that I want to tell you, which will become, we'll come back to it next week, and from time to time, it's an important cloud about Targum. Targum does not translate a name. Any name which appears in the Torah, Targum does not translate it. He tells it as it is. Though it says Ken Koresh Moi Reuven, so he doesn't say Reuven's Chazubar. It's not Chazubar, it's Reuven. He gives the name exactly as it is. The name over here was Beersheba, and Targum says Beersheba. He went to Beersheba. Over here he says Be'er Dishva. Be'er Dishva means the Be'er of the Shvua. It's not the name. The name is Beersheba. So apparently, the name of this place was not Beersheba. The name of this place was Shiva. V'ikra Shiva. This area, this town that grew up around this new Be'er, oasis, whatever it was called Shiva. But the people called it Beersheba. They said this is the Be'er about where they made the covenant. So they called it Beersheba. They called it Be'er Dishva. Beersheba is not a name. And says also, the only other time in Unkelos where it's called Beersheba. But the only other time that it's called Be'er Dishva, Vayetze Yaakov, me Beersheba, it says me Be'er Dishva. Why? Because Yitzchak was living in Shiva. He wasn't living in Beersheba. He's living in Shiva. People called it Beersheba, Be'er Dishva. So Yaakov left from Be'er Dishva. It was not Beersheba. Beersheba was a different place. That was the place where Avram was, and where Yitzchak went now. Okay. One more thing briefly. It says V'yesav ben Arboim Shana V'ikach Ishas Yehudis Bas Beri Ves Basmas Bas Elon Achiti. 2 women, and both of them were Chitis. I mentioned this last week. So in Parshas Vayishlach, where you have Esav Odo Bas Eloin, and Yehudis Bas Be'eri. So he says over there, Rashi says that Odo Bas Eloin is really, who's Odo, Basmas or Alivama? One of the two. Odo Bas Eloin is a Basmas. This our pasuk Basmas. That's Odo. Her name was Odo. She was called Basmas because she used to burn incense for the Avodah Zarah. So Basmas is a nickname. So it's not a stira. And Yehudis was because she showed herself to be from, but her name was really Alivama. Now, why is they called over here? Both of them are called Chiti, and over there one's called Chiti or Chivi. So as we explained last week, Chiti was a social class. The people that belonged to the ruling class, not necessarily. I mean, the ruling class was Chiti because the ethnic Chitim were the dominant ethnicity. But anybody who belonged to the ruling class was called a Chiti. But later in Vayishlach, when we're talking about the genealogy, then you have to tell us the true ethnicity. So Odo Bas Elon was a Chiti, and Ano Bas Sivoin Alivama was a Chivi. They were ethnically Chiti and Chivi, but both of them were part of the nobility, the government. Okay, so now, just wanted to mention it because this comes up many times, and what the Chiti means. Now, so Yitzchak is ready to give the brachas, and so Rivka told Yitzchak that he should dress up as Esav, make believe he's Esav, and he should take the brachas. And she told him, so like b'ni. She said, what is the like b'ni? So the uncle says that Ali is Samar b'nevuah. Rivka had a nevuah that this is what he should do. So there was no question over here of sheker. There was no question. You know, I heard once from the Chafetz Chaim that if somebody knocks on your door and says that please hide me, somebody's running after me, and he wants to kill me. So you say, okay, go in, get under the bed. And then 2 minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and the other person's there. Is that person here? I'm looking for him. So what does the Midas Emes require you to do? The Midas Emes requires you to say, he's not here. Don't be, Midas Emes doesn't require you to say that he's under the bed. That's not so. So Midas Emes means the right thing. So over here, this was the right thing. This is what he should do. That's the right thing. And really, he really was entitled to Bechayra. He bought it. It deserved. He belonged to it. And it was a nevuah. It was a nevuah. So clearly, this was the right thing to do. So what does Yaakov do? He comes in. Rivka had a nevuah that he should do this. That he should go and dress up as Esav, and he says, don't worry, it's not going to hurt you, because I had a nevuah that this is what you should do. So you have a nevuah, so you do it, right? Alai kilascha b'ni, so it says, Alai yisamer b'nevuah, l'yaisen, l'vataya, alach, bri. He says, you don't have to worry about it, nothing's going to happen, this is what you should do. So he should do it. So he comes so he does it, and he comes and he has to fool his father. He has to fool him. Vayomer said, Avi, Vayomer hineni. Vayomer Avi, Vayomer hineni, mi ata b'ni. So Yitzchak said, who are you? So he said, Vayomer Yaakov Elaviv, Anoichi Esav b'chayrecha. I am Esav, your b'chayr. But Rashi says that he parsed it. He said, Anoichi, me. Esav is your bechar. So he parsed it. And then again later also he says, there's another place he also says it. Oh, he said, Pasuk Chav Daled, V'yomer ani. V'yomer ata ze b'nei Esav. Are you my son Esav? V'yomer ani, me. So Rashi says, Lo yomer ani Esav. Didn't say I'm Esav. Ela ani, I'm me. So what's the point of this? He's trying to avoid sheker. This is pure deception. He's coming in here, he's telling Yitzchak words which he knows Yitzchak will understand that it means Anochi Esav b'chorecha. He knows Ani means I'm Esav. He knows what how Yitzchak will hear this. And he's saying it anyway, and he's deceiving him, and he's meant to deceive him. It's the right thing, deceive him. So what's this business of saying in his own, he's saying Ani, Anochi Esav b'chorecha. What's the purpose of this? Is he avoiding sheker? There is no sheker involved. What's he doing? So I would like to suggest that there's an art called acting. And the art of acting is something called method acting. So the Stanislavski method or something like that. That means that a really good actor gets into the role that he's playing. He becomes that person. And sometimes, even when they're not on set or on the stage, even when they're, over the weekend or whatever, they're still acting like that person because to really carry it off, you really, to a certain extent, have to become that person. So a good actor could play a villain, he could play a hero, and when he's playing a villain, he's a villain. When he's playing a hero, he's a hero. He could play a kind person, because then when he does that, he's a kind person. When he could be a murderer, because when he plays a murderer, he's a murderer. Yaakov was playing Esav. He was stepping in the role and playing Esav. But he wanted to protect himself. He didn't want to become Esav. So he was talking to himself. He said, when I say, Anochi b'charecha Esav, to you I'm saying that I am Esav your b'char, and that's what I want you to hear, and that's what I want you to believe. But in my own mind I'm saying, no, it's not true. Anochi, even though I said it, but what I meant was for myself. Anochi ami, Esav is your bechar. I want to separate myself from the role. I don't want to step into the role completely. That's what Yaakov was doing. He wasn't trying to avoid sheker. There's no sheker involved there. What he did is 100% right. It was what was called for. But by stepping into this role, he wanted to separate himself. But Lemaisa, he was not 100% successful. Because Yitzchak said, Akol kol Yaakov, Vayidayim de'Esav. You sound like Yaakov, V'daber b'tachnunim. He wasn't so successful. He didn't play, he was successful in separating himself. So he said, Kumna avi. He said, he spoke with Tachnunim. So the Yaakov came out. So Yitzchak said, well, I'm touching the arm, I feel Esav. I'm listening to the words, it sounds like Yaakov. Who is this person? He was confused. Akol kol Yaakov V'dayim de'Esav. So he was not so successful in his deception. He was successful in his resistance to the deception. Now, in Parshas Chukas, when Klal Yisrael wanted to go through the land of Edom, so they told him, they sent him a message, Vanitzak el Hashem. Oh no, this before. 1 second. They told him the whole story. We went down to Mitzrayim. There's plenty to talk about over here. But they said, "V'nitzak al Hashem." We cried out Hashem, "V'yishma kaleinu." We davened to Hashem, and He helped us. V'yishlach malach. He sent a malach, which is Moshe. V'yitzeinu in Mitzrayim. So Rashi says, "V'yishma kaleinu, bebracha sheberachnu avinu." Our father Yitzchak gave us a bracha. Hakol kol Yaakov. It's a bracha, she'onu tzayakim v'nenim. He gave us a bracha that when we daven, we're heard. Later, the Melech Edom says, I'm going to go, if you decide you come in here, I'm going to go out against you with my army. Atem is goyim, bekoil sharishchem aviechem. You're so proud of this bracha that your father gave you. That vanitzak al shem yishmak aleinu. So he's vani eitzei aleichem b'masher risheni ovi. The Melech Edom says, I'm going to come out with the bracha that Yitzchak gave us. V'alchar b'chatichya. So you're going to come with a kol Yaakov, I'm going to come with a char b'chatichya, we're going to have a fight. So they turned away, didn't go. But how is a kol Yaakov a bracha? A kol Yaakov is a puzzlement. Yitzchak is saying, who is this person? He sounds like Yaakov, his arms feel like Esav. Who is this person? How is it a bracha? So I would like to suggest that very often people have all kinds of different talents and chunas, and they don't really have a crystallized self-image. They don't know exactly what they are. You can have a good bacher in yeshiva, a good bacher, and he has all kinds of and the Rebbe will say to him, London. Then that will tell him that that's what he is, and that's what he should do. And that's what he should pursue. In his own mind, his self-image is crystallized. He's a London, and that's what he has to do. He has to work on. Another person who is very kind, and he has other tchunas, so maybe somebody will tell him, you are a Bal Chesed. So in his own mind, it becomes crystallized. Oh, that's what I am. That's my identity. I'm a Bal Chesed. I'm a Bal Chesed. So Memela, this person will go out and he'll establish a Bikur Cholim and the Tanche Shabbos and the Hatzalah, because he's a Bal Chesed. That's what he is. It's not just that he's kind to people. That's what he is. When Yitzchak said, Hakol Kol Yaakov, he said, this is the Kol Yaakov. This is what you are. You're a Mispalel. You're a Mischanan. That's what he said. So that crystallized in Yaakov's mind, that's what I am. That's my identity. I'm a Mischanan. I'm a pleader. I'm a pleader. I plead. That's what I do. I'm not a fighter. I'm not aggressive. I am a pleader. That's how I do things. I plead. So Memela, why is Tfilas in the Shmoyim? Because if that's what you are, you're coming to Rabban Shalom with a plea as a pleader. You're in the pleading room. You're pleading. You're coming from yourself to please. You're not being aggressive. You're not trying to push yourself onto the Rabban Shalom. You're not trying to oppose anything. You're not trying to appeal to his emotions, which he doesn't have. You're not trying to any of that. You're pleading from yourself. That is an excellent tefillah, and such a tefillah is heard. That is a bracha. The bracha was better than just giving him a bracha should be. By telling him that, he gave him, at that point, he gave him the bracha that is what he became. He became a mischanan, and a mischanan, the tefillahs are heard. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again next week.